there, this is Trisha. Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to share this card project that I made with some products from the stamp market using a fun watercoloring technique with stamp market ink refills. So I am starting with this heart cover plate die, nested heart cover plate it's called, and I am using this to cut from watercolor cardstock. And it's just this beautiful kind of concentric heart in the shape of the A2 card. I'm using my favorite Wonder Forest watercolor brushes and some clean water. And then I have my Reinkers. I have blush pink, bubblegum, navy, and then I don't have a reinker for my Curry ink pad, so I am just going to use the ink pad itself, and I'm going to be watercoloring with these. So I'm going to take each little die cut element out one at a time. I am using some repositionable tape to just secure them down to my work surface. And I'm going to use my reinkers right there on my glass mat and just put a tiny dot is all you need. So I'm wetting my paper with some clear water. Again, this is watercolor paper, and I like to use a smooth watercolor paper. And then I am wetting the reinker a little bit and dabbing that in, and then I'm just going to let it sort of bleed together and do its own thing. And I'm going to continue this with the different cutouts from my die cut, all of the different pieces. So I'm starting with the blush ink for the two smallest hearts. And my intention was to start lightest and get darker and darker as the hearts went out. So I do end up, layering this color and building it up as I go. So for this next heart, I'm going to use the bubblegum ink. Again, just one little drop is all you need. If you don't have a glass mat, you could do this on an acrylic block or a palette or any non-porous surface that will let you not absorb that ink. So I didn't have quite enough water on here, so I'm putting a touch more water on there. And you can see I'm holding my paintbrush really loosely, kind of far from the tip, and just letting it dance along the surface there. I want a real uneven watercolory look. I do want everything to be covered. I don't want a ton of white space, but I don't want it to look like a nice solid blend. I really wanted it to have that watercolory look with variation. So as I am seeing this dry back, that second heart there, I felt needed some more color. So that's the beauty of this. You can always layer more up. So I just went back to some more blush ink, and I am just tapping another layer of that in. And then I will let those dry while I move on to my next largest heart. Again, a little repositionable tape to tack that down. And now I'm going to move on to the Curry ink. So if you don't have any reinkers, you can always just smush your ink pad, assuming it is a water-based dye ink, onto your work surface or a glass mat or a palette, like I said, any non-porous surface, even an acrylic block, and pick it up with some water to paint with it. This works great with distress inks and lots of different types of dye inks. I love the inks from the stamp market, both because they paint beautifully and because I just love their color palettes so much. So I'm painting this one, and the Curry is turning out a little more like lemony than I had envisioned. So I'm going to end up adding a little bit of more peachy color. What I wanted were more earthy tones. So I end up playing with this a little bit. So now I'm getting on to the frame portion that's like outside of the hearts. And you always want to make sure that when you pull those off of your die cut that you paint them correct side up. And I'm wetting the paper and then repeating the same process using the navy ink refill. And I'm starting with a really light wash with this. You'll see by the end of this, I build up lots of layers and I end up making this much darker. But that's the great thing about watercolors. You can always start light, build up and you see the glazing of each layer over the last, and it really makes for a pretty texture and a more interesting look. Again, I'm just dotting that color in. This is not swiping or blending so much as just letting the color kind of bleed out into each other. Those little corner pieces, I also did blue, and I just did that off screen. So here's where I go back and I'm deepening up some of these colors. Like I said, I wanted them to get just a little more earthy and a little bit more robust. So I'm putting a little more blush onto this open heart. And then I decided to get out my peach ink and try to temper that pink heart a little bit. It was a little more pink than I wanted, and I wanted it to be coral. I probably should have started with the Coral Reef ink from their line, but I didn't. And so I just added a little peach on top of this and got closer to the look that I was after. And for the big yellow heart, I did sort of the same thing. I used the rusty ink to give that a little bit more of an earthy yellow instead of a bright citrusy yellow. So wetting my paper again and then just kind of glazing over the top with that rusty color and just a wash of that. You still see the yellow underneath, but it just tempers that lemony type feel to it, and it makes it a little bit more rusty, which is kind of what I was after. So this to me is so much fun. It's just like really relaxing. It doesn't require a lot of precision. It's just a fun way to be creative. So I started nesting all these together to see if I was happy, and those first two peach hearts felt like they were a little too close in color, and that blue wasn't nearly dark enough. So again, I'm just going to set these to continue drying, and I will continue to build color where I need it. I'm adding more peach onto this smaller open heart, and then I will add lots more of the navy to those perimeter pieces. So I'm just finishing up here, and then I will give everything time to dry before I adhere it. I'm using some liquid glue, and I found the easiest way to adhere this kind of puzzle piece this back together was to start in a corner, because then you have some straight edges there that you can line up, and they tell you exactly where you need to be. Probably after doing the first corner, I probably should have put the big yellow heart in and then nestled the other corner around it. This worked too, but I did have to, kind of fuss with it a little bit. So I guess if I did it again, I would probably do the big yellow outline heart next. But getting these lined up with the corners and remembering that this entire panel is going to end up being an A2 size. So you make sure that your white base that you're adhering to is A2 so that it matches up. These little angled rectangular pieces are not interchangeable, so you do need to check and make sure that you've got the right side before you adhere it down. So I'm just tucking those into the corners, and then those little triangles, and this top triangle also does have a correct orientation, so you kind of have to fiddle with that to make sure that that fits in just perfectly. But it is easy. It's just like a puzzle. So even though all three of those are blue, I like that you can still see the edges a little bit, and it has that watercolored look to it. So using that liquid glue to lay in the rest of my pieces, and I'm so happy with the colors. This is what I was going for, a little bit, I don't know, a little less bright, a little more earthy. I don't know if that's the right words, but. So a final little watercolor step that I'm doing is just clear water on my brush and splattering that all over my card. Let that sit for a little bit and react with that ink, and then I will just lay my paper towel over that and create a little bit more texture on the card front. So that completes my background. Now I'm going to move on to a focal point. I have this set from Tailored Expressions, and it has these really cute little Adirondack chairs. So I stamped those in black ink, waterproof ink, and I'm just very lightly hitting this with a little bit of that rusty color. My intention at first was to make these look like white Adirondack chairs, but just with a little, a little weathered looking. I didn't do this on watercolor paper because I knew I was going to add so little water. So this is how it originally looked, and I went ahead and fussy cut it out and then repeated the whole process with the other chair. But then when I put it on my panel, it just seemed too washed out. And then I also kind of thought I wanted it to have a feeling of almost like these two chairs looking at a sunset, even though that's hearts. But that's the feeling I wanted, so they needed to be more silhouette instead of so bright. So I just grabbed some Copic markers. I've got some cool grays. I believe it's a C4 and a C8. And I'm just going to darken these up. I don't want them to look like true black silhouettes because I still want to see the shape and the detail of the chair so that you clearly know what it is. But I did want them to look like they were backlit, staring off into a sunset. This is going to be an anniversary card for my in-laws, and we all love the outdoors and love being on the water and outside, so I thought this kind of had the right feel for them, and I could just picture the two of them sitting somewhere together looking at the sunset, and it felt like it had a nice anniversary vibe to it. So once I got these chairs recolored, I liked this so much better, but I did feel they needed to be grounded. So I grabbed this die. This is Stitched Slopes from Lawn Fawn, and I cut a little slope from Black Cardstock, and I just trimmed that out to fit the bottom of my page. And I'm going to use a sentiment from the Stamp Market Sending You stamp set. It's a smaller stamp set with some really bold, simple sentiments that I love. There's one in there that just says so much love, and I guess it's intended to be paired with the Sending You so much love, but I just used it as on its own because I thought it worked great for this anniversary card. I've got that in the MISTI, stamped it with some VersaMark. I'm sprinkling on some white embossing powder, and then I will heat that and set it. I did put that way off to the side, and that'll just be a nice little sentiment at the bottom of my page. So the only thing that was bugging me about those chairs still was when I originally fussy cut them out, I left a white border. That's fine, and really you do not have to do this extra step, but I just didn't want that white border, so I went around again and cut right up against my stamped line, and that to me just made a big difference. Once I do that, I always run a little black pen along those edges, so any exposed white paper or any place I didn't cut it perfectly kind of gets camouflaged, and it ends up looking more like a ephemera element or something, and nice clean edges. For the inside under those arms, I just used a craft knife to cut that out. So now I am so much happier. I love the darker chairs, and I love them cut with no white border. So now it is time to assemble. I'm just going to put some liquid glue behind that slope and adhere that flat down to my inlaid card front. Get that all square on the bottom. And then I will put lots of foam tape behind my chairs to pop those up and give them a little bit of dimension. And again, just place them back as though they're looking into that heart-shaped sunset off in the distance. And even though this is, just these simple chairs, I don't know, something about this just feels really romantic. I love it. I think it's perfect for an anniversary card. So I have this tiny little wood veneer heart, and I thought that would be a nice finishing touch. I painted that white with a Posca paint pen. Then I'm taking the same paint pen and just running along the edge of one of those hearts and adding a little row of dots. What I'm trying to do here is put a little white detail to tie in with our white sentiment and with the white heart that I'm going to put in. I also ran a white gel pen right along the bottom of my page to break up that black hill a little and to draw the eye to the sentiment. And then once that heart dried, that wood veneer heart dried, I glued that right in the center, and that is my finished card. I think it is so sweet. I love how it turned out, and I would love to be sitting there with my hubby looking off into the sunset. I hope you enjoyed this look today at watercoloring with your inks. I used Stamp Market inks and a lot of their products today. And if you like this, please subscribe, give me a thumbs up, and I hope to see you again real soon. Thank you.